this is my review of Sonic X. Okay, so this episode actually explores the actual lost civilization of Murasia, and also the subsequent battle between Sonic and Dr. Eggman, and also another third party that shows up. I'll get to that in a minute. So it actually starts off with Sonic and the crew making preparations to actually go down into the Lost Society of Murasia. And as they're doing their preparations, the gun soldiers actually yell at Topaz for basically getting herself kidnapped, which wasn't her fault. And point out that if she hadn't been kidnapped, they could have stopped Eggman. But she points out that her being captured by Eggman shouldn't have stopped them from taking him down. And then leaves in a huff with Mr. Tanaka going to go console her and also venting his frustration on a rock, which he does successfully break, I should mention. And although he does hurt his hand, and this is something I haven't brought up yet. Mr. Tanaka is actually a very competent fighter. I will admit that he is constantly shown to be a skilled fighter. It's just 90% of the time it's used for comic relief. His skill often winds up becoming a moot point because he's often fighting opponents who don't really give a shit about his martial arts. But in any case, while he's going to do that, Dr. Eggman is actually proceeding to go into a cave system to go out to and prepare, and Deco and Boko and Bokun actually get worried about Dr. Eggman is going to land in the lava and get them all killed. But Dr. Eggman points out that he actually has made preparations to actually navigate the cave that they're in, and reveals that his little egg ship can actually transform into a tank, or at least has tank treads on it, and then proceeds to go through the tunnel to the Lost Kingdom of Murasia, which the group does eventually follow him. But in any case, as they're preparing to go down, after everybody discusses how they're going to go down into the Kingdom of Murasia, Sonic, Rouge, and Knuckles all decide to go alongside Tails and Chris. And Chris and Tails riding in the Extornado, while Sonic, Rouge, and Knuckles just kind of ride on the outside. And decide to go down that way. But as they are actually discussing that, Topaz and Mr. Tanaka actually bring back a box that was apparently invented by the Murasian civilization. It's apparently made of a rare metal that only the Murasians knew how to make. And he states that it was mostly indestructible. And then he opens it to reveal that there was actually a jewel inside, which catches Rouge's interest. And Dr. Cadbury then proceeds to explain how the Murasians had a wide access to a lot of jewels, gems, and other related precious things, and points out that where there's one, there's most likely a lot more. And Rouge points out just finds a newfound interest in archaeology, since apparently she doesn't know that that's where gems come from. You think despite being a master quote unquote thief that she would actually know where gems come from, but apparently not. But in any case, after that, they then Dr. Cadbury and Tails then proceed to set up communications between themselves and the Extornado. And with that, the Extornado then proceeds to go down inside the volcano, and they eventually are able to successfully track where Dr. Eggman has gone. They realize that Dr. Eggman took a tunnel that went directly to the Kingdom of Murasia, but also note that he has since blocked it off after he went through to make sure nobody could follow him. But Sonic gets close that that's not going to stop him, and then proceeds to go into a spin dash to try and burrow through the tunnel that Dr. Eggman had buried. But it quickly becomes apparent that that's not working, and that he's going to bring the entire cave down on top of them. So he stops, and they decide that they'll actually have to go another way. And Rouge eventually finds a little small crack that they can go through, and she, Sonic, and Knuckles actually go through that, and then proceed to go through these various cave systems until they arrive at the Lost Kingdom of Murasia, which causes some very funny sequences to happen. Meanwhile, since Chris and Tails can't go through because they have to pilot the Extornado, decide to find a much bigger cave system, and they do ultimately wind up going to the same place. So we don't actually see their journey, but they do ultimately wind up getting to the Lost Kingdom of Murasia at the same time Sonic, Rouge, and Knuckles do. So yeah, well, that winds up working out. But Yeah, but in case the main bulk of the journeys of Sonic, Rouge, and Knuckles navigating the cave systems, and the various hilarity that ensues. Like, for example, there's one situation where where Sonic, Knuckles, and Rouge are actually climbing down a shaft, and Knuckles tells everybody not to watch their footing since the walls are very slippery. But Rouge loses her footing and lands on top of the two guys and just knocks them all to the bottom of the cave. They proceed to keep going, and also there's another sequence where Knuckles is where they all have to cross a river. Sonic doesn't want to, and neither does Rouge for different reasons. She doesn't want to get her makeup wet, but Knuckles ultimately makes Sonic go and points out that he doesn't really care if the bat leaves him behind. If he leaves that behind, but Rouge decides that Knuckles isn't going to be able to get rid of her that easily, and then proceeds to come along with. But in any case, they eventually do wind up in the Lost Kingdom of Murasia, which Dr. Cadbury explains is actually an underground civilization. As it turns out, after their nation sank, the island of the Murasians actually built a new society under the island. They built a new society underground, used their advanced technology to build an artificial sun, and have just been flourishing underground for thousands of years until they eventually died off from extinction. So, yeah, Dr. Cadbury also proceeds to also explain that they actually did encounter quite a few large monster-like creatures in the underground as well, or at least according to rumors and myths. And tells the rest of the group to be careful because if those rumors are true, that the monsters could very well attack them. And Knuckles doesn't really care about the monsters being down there either way, because it's just another thing for him to fight. And Knuckles points out that Rouge just points out that Knuckles is cute when he tries to go and fight, but he also points out that which just causes them to start bickering. And Chuck, who's listening to this entire conversation over the intercom, points out that those two are like oil and vinegar, and Mr. Tanaka and Topaz just shrug at one another, which is just kind of funny. Because they're both best friends of Knuckles and Rouge, and they know that not every couple gets along, so they just shrug at one another. It's funny. But in case, around the same time where the crew actually does gather in the Kingdom of Murasia, and actually are setting up base, so they can actually set up a seismic detector so they can read seismic activities in case the volcano erupts while they're in there. Which interesting, it does toward the end of the episode, but that's not important right now. Dr. Eggman is also setting up his base to try and find the volcanic hotspot, and at which point Bokoon shows up and Bokoon comes in and tells Dr. Eggman that he's hungry. And Dr. Eggman agrees that they should stop for lunch, and then orders Deco and Boko to find some food. And they object, pointing out that they should send Bokoon instead, since he's the one who brought it up. But Bokoon merely protests, stating that he could easily get eaten by a snake and become a snack himself. So Dr. Eggman points out that since Deco and Boko are indigestible, they should be more than able to actually go and find food without getting eaten. And this starts to piss them off. So yeah, throughout this entire series, they've obviously been the subject of a lot of Dr. Eggman's bullying, I guess would be the best way to put it. They've just been subject to a torment of Dr. Eggman because they have to work for him. He built them. But they do start to voice their concerns in this episode just a little bit. And they point out that they're a little bit grumpy that Dr. Eggman made them look for food, but they do eventually, their luck does begin to turn when they do find what they believe to be a very large cherry, and then stack up on top of one another to try and grab it. Only to discover that, to their horror, that's actually the end of an antenna to a very big moth-like creature, which then proceeds to chase them straight into Sonic's camp. So yeah, Sonic and his crew have since finished setting up the seismic detector so that they can actually read for seismic readings. And it's around this moment where Deco and Boko run into their camp and are being with the giant bug in tow. And obviously, the group has mixed feelings about what's going on. Since on the one hand, Deco and Boko have been their enemies for most of the series up to this point. So obviously they're a little reluctant to help, but they realize that they can't leave somebody to be to their own devices if indeed they do need help. So Chris decides to actually go and save them. What he does is he picks up a giant rock and distract the monster, which causes it to chase after him as well. And then the three of them proceed to run and slide down a cave system back into Dr. Eggman's camp. And when Dr. Eggman voices his frustration over the fact that Deco and Boko have more or less brought an enemy into his camp, they really point out that Chris saved them, and that they're more than and that they brought him there because he saved them. But Dr. Eggman points out that because of that, he now has to take Chris prisoner, which is something he didn't want to have to do, but he will do anyway because he has to. But in any case, shortly after Chris goes quote unquote missing, Sonic and Rouge both decide that they should actually go and look for him. But Sonic deciding to just go on a blind panic and just race around, since obviously the volcano is starting to erupt. Case in point, Dr. Catboy discovers a seismic shift and tells the crew that if they don't get out of there soon, they could likely be buried or worse. Which is what prompts Rouge and Sonic to go look for Chris. Sonic decides to go on land and use his speed to cover large distances, while Rouge decides to take from the sky, as per her role as a bat, and actually use her echolocation and high advantage to actually go looking for him. Although Rouge later gets distracted because she sees some gems instead and decides to scoop as many as she can before she leaves. But in any case, Dr. Eggman does eventually locate the geological hotspot and proceeds to place a detonator there, planning to leave in like 15 minutes so that he can actually successfully escape, and then re-explains his plans to Chris, pointing out that his entire plan of leveling the planet and turning it into his Eggman Empire on the ruins. Which Chris points out that Sonic will stop him like he always does, But Dr. Eggman points out that he doesn't really care if Sonic can stop him because he's already so close. He doesn't feel like Sonic can stop him at this point, and then proceeds to shove Chris out of his way so he can plant the detonator, which Deco and Boko later pretty much remark is mean and point out that he shouldn't have done that. Especially since Chris's arms are tied up and he can't actually catch himself. But Dr. Eggman points out that the brat shouldn't have gotten in his way in the first place. So he just kind of and with that, he then proceeds to go to his work while Deco and Boko rescue Chris and proceed to untie him so that he can actually catch himself in case that happens again. But as Dr. Eggman is actually setting up a detonator, Bokun is just kind of chilling in a cave nearby. He's chilling on top of a rock that's shaped very much like a dinosaur. And he even points out that's a little bit neat that he found a dinosaur rock. But as he's kind of just chilling out, the seismic activity in the cave starts to increase. And then he sees a giant robot come out and proceeds to chase Bokun, who then reports back to Dr. Eggman that something is happening that he found a giant robot, and naturally everybody panics. Bokun and Dr. Eggman get back into the egg ship and proceed to hightail it out of there, while Chris, Deco, and Boko both run to try and find Sonic. And at that exact moment, Rouge hears Bokun panicking. She hears him nearby, and then proceeds to swoop up Chris before he could actually get attacked with a robot. Meanwhile, Deco and Boko kind of laments on the fact that Dr. Eggman left them behind and are a little bit annoyed by that. But I guess the giant robot then proceeds to attack them, and Rouge tries to protect Chris by attacking the robot, but it quickly becomes apparent that the robot just does not give a shit. The robot is not only very big, but as we've established, it's made of a rare metal that is nigh on indestructible. So Rouge barely puts a dent in the damn thing, and it just swats her away like a mosquito. Which, oddly enough, it looks like one, but that's neither here nor there. At which point, So, at which point, Chris realizes that he actually needs to think of to do something, and remembering that they left the detonator behind, he then proceeds to go pick it up and wondering if he can use it to actually defeat the robot somehow. Diko and Boko decide to tag along, saying that they can help and that Chris shouldn't have to fight the robot alone. And when Chris is a little bit confused, pointing out what they could actually do, they then proceed that they actually do have a couple of functionalities that enable them to combine together into a bigger robot, and explain that when they combine that they can actually combine into a battle mode to actually fight the robot one-on-one. And Chris points out that that's impressive and tells them to do it immediately. But when they do, nothing happens, and then they get swatted away by the robot and all of their limbs fall off. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't get to find out if that configuration is actually true or not. They just kind of get defeated before that can actually happen. But in case, as the robot closes in, Sonic and Knuckles actually show up and start facing off against the robot. But it quickly becomes apparent that it's a losing battle and they can't actually fend it off. It quickly becomes apparent that they're not able to actually land a detonator in it, and eventually Chris gets the idea that they can actually use the detonator. It does eventually reiterate his point that they can use the detonator to blow the robot up, and gives it to Sonic, who then proceeds to throw it down the robot's gullet, and the robot explodes from the inside out. At which point the rest of the crew reconvene at the extornado with Tails hollering at them that they need to get the hell out of there. And they do. They all get back on the extornado and escape the volcano as it's erupting. But back on the yacht, they then lament that they had to leave Diko and Boko behind. Meanwhile, Rouge is a little bit disappointed that she had to leave some of her treasure behind since she dropped everything to go and rescue Chris. But does remark that she actually at the very least got the one gem, so she's pretty happy about that. But Dr. Cadbury snatches it up from her and points out that it's the last artifact of the Murasian civilization, and then thanks Rouge personally for actually bringing it back to him. At which point he then proceeds to discuss the Murasian civilization himself, about how his exploration into it has actually raised more questions than it did answers. Namely, what actually happened that caused the Murasians to be wiped out if they actually moved underground, and also points out the giant robot that was guarding the place. So he then becomes confused as to what actually caused the situation to be wiped out, to the civilization to be wiped out, and points out that he hopes he'll be able to study it further someday in the future. Meanwhile, Chris looks back at the island and again laments on the fact that they weren't able to save Diko and Boko, who more or less, I mean, yeah, they kind of got beaten to shit, but he does lament that they more or less saved him and they helped bring down the giant robot in the end. So he points out that points out that they were actually heroes in the end. And Mr. Tanaka even points out that they should actually honor their sacrifice, and Amy even is kind of a little bit upset that she's not going to be able to face them as enemies anymore. At which point Diko and Boko emerge from the back room of the yacht, revealing that they're actually completely fine. As it turns out, Tails actually scooped up their parts and put them back together back on the yacht before anything could happen to them. So, and he and Chuck have been working to actually repair the two robots. And Chuck even points out that they're actually very brave robots, and points out that they should actually would make useful allies in the future if they would decide to switch sides. Which they confess that they do, pointing out that they're tired of Dr. Eggman picking on them, and point out that they actually do want to be heroes for a change and actually make their own destiny. And then over the side of the yacht loudly declare that they quit. So yeah, that's how this episode ends. It ends with the lost. It does kind of end on the note that the lost civilization of Murasia is probably lost forever. But in the process, Sonic and his team actually gained two new allies, Diko and Boko, who up to this point have been, well, not necessarily villains. They've more so been neutral because they work for Dr. Eggman, but clearly didn't like doing it. But here they finally vocalized their independence from Eggman. They no longer want to work for him because he's a bastard. He sucks. He doesn't treat his subordinates fairly, and Diko and Boko are a perfect example of that. He doesn't really he always uses them as the guinea pigs and for grunt work. And obviously they finally got sick of it in this episode and finally decided to revolt against Dr. Eggman and help bring him down. So yeah, that's how this episode ends. Deco and Boko are good guys now, and that's going to be interesting to see going forward. But for right now, I think that's going to do it for my review of Sonic X. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well if you want to help support me. It's only a couple bucks a month. It helps me out. So if you guys do want to help support future projects, by all means, link is down in the description. Also, if you guys want to support me even further, be sure to check out my Twitch. Link is down in the description as well. You can also go check it out by going to twitch.tv/ZackMurasia/Switch. I stream every Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys want to go check that out, by all means, go ahead. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a very recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But regardless of whether or not you do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!